Welcome back to the van and the van build. I am Krishan, aka Confluence, and I am sat in my van, which is version 1 complete. Still needs finishing touches. It will never be complete, really. Every van builder knows that, but I have been living in it for a little while, so it definitely works, except things keep breaking, but that's all irrelevant. This video is about building the wheel arch box that's going to house my electrical hub, aka power station, and also doing the rear left wall. Now, in principle, building the wheel arch box is reasonably simple. It's not exactly a complete box. It's like a half box, or maybe a 2/3 box. But as I was still very new to woodworking really at this point, it was a little bit to get my head around. I watched a couple of videos. I will try and find those and link them in the description because they were quite helpful, even if they were by people who were very good at what they were doing, and those are not always the most helpful videos for a noob, but they still did help. It's not too difficult. I didn't actually go with the sort of normal way that you would build a box, or at least one normal way. The normal way I ended up building a lot more of my boxes later, of kind of building a frame and then attaching plywood to it. I instead just kind of screwed the ply to the bits of batten to give them support and give them something to screw together with, and then kind of assembled that. It was actually relatively straightforward. It's just a bit tricky figuring out all the measurements. I definitely made some mistakes and did some unintended stuff. The thing that I kept doing a lot on this project was failing to account for the thickness of the ply when measuring like other bits of ply and the batten. It just means that you end up being off by, 10 or so millimeters, depending on the thickness of your ply, or like what you're intending for the things to kind of slot together as, whether you want things in front or behind, or usually you don't want a gap, so one of them has got to overlap the other one to make sure that it kind of sits properly. So yeah, there was a little bit of extra messing around, but once I'd made the mistakes and gotten through it, I did have all the bits to put it together, and I think I have like a single shot of me actually assembling the box, and that went okay as far as I remember. I probably should have watched the footage before recording this, but as I was being more cautious at this phase, I initially screwed it together before adding glue. So I screwed things together to make sure everything fit and it made sense, and then unscrewed it and then added some of my Fix-All Turbo as replacement wood glue. I'm sure wood glue would be better, but I just had so much of this stuff that it just kind of made sense to use it because it would still work. I mostly managed to avoid screwing into end grain, which I think is generally a good idea, but to be honest, later in the build I did do more of that. I don't think it's as big a problem as it is kind of chalked up to be. If you're a serious hardcore woodworker, you're gonna frown upon that, but I did do some research and found someone actually demonstrating that it can be really strong. It's still not the ideal way of doing it, so I was avoiding it here, but I basically avoided it by screwing the ply directly to the batten rather than creating a frame, and that's not always the right way to go. Later on, when I built other boxes, I didn't do that, and everything seems strong. I mean, my kitchen hasn't fallen apart yet, so can't be that bad. I don't know, man. I didn't put batten along the bottom of the wheel arch box because I decided that I would put that on the outside to give me something to kind of screw through to, because I knew I was going to need that piece of batten to secure the batteries in place, so I figured I'd just save a bit of space by not having it on both sides, just having it on one side. I think that was a fine decision. A fine decision, good sir. I mean, it came together all right. Once I'd kind of gotten everything secured and in place, it felt strong and secure. So yeah, I don't know. I think it was all right. So the box was like mostly right in terms of how it fit, but it did highlight the fact that I should have cut down the ply for the wall more. It was a little bit awkward. Like, I really wanted it to sit a bit more close, but the wall kind of bowed outwards a bit. Yeah, it wasn't so ideal. But I think it was around this point that I realised that my power station was in the wrong place, as I alluded to at the end of the last video. Essentially, it kind of dawned on me that almost my entire weight was going to be on the right hand side of the van. There was going to be almost nothing of any magnitude on the left hand side. All of my power, batteries, the kitchen, and all the the weight from that, the water, probably other things that I'm not thinking about right now, myself when I'm driving, I guess. It was all going to be on the right hand side, and this just didn't quite sit right. I mean, Camper Vibe put a lot more of their weight on the right hand side, like their batteries are on the right hand side as well as the kitchen units, but they did have some stuff like tanks underneath that were spread across the middle, and possibly other things that I'm not thinking about right now. The thing is, like, I don't know how bad it is to have a pretty uneven weight distribution. Maybe it matters a lot, maybe it doesn't matter that much. I wasn't really expecting it to affect handling particularly. What I was more concerned about was wearing down like the suspension and other kind of mechanical parts of the van much more quickly on one side than the other, and having like weird failures like that. I don't really know enough to know if it was a big deal and to know that I needed to swap it around for definite, but I made the decision to do it. It was a bit of a painful one because I'd already cut all my wires to be the right length to be positioned on the right hand side, and so now I was going to need a lot more cable to make it over to the other side for basically everything. And I was going to have to, well, either buy a lot more cable, cut it out, re-thread it to the conduit and all that jazz, which I really didn't want to do, or I was going to have to like join all these cables together, which is what I ended up doing in the end. So there was a lot more crimping and cutting, and yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare. But I think for the time consumption it was worth it, because by moving all that heavy electrical stuff on the other side, I probably have balanced the weight out fairly well. I did try and figure out some way that I could rearrange the van to put more of the weight on the other side, but there really wasn't that much that I could do, shy of maybe putting the desk behind me where it would be right here on the left wall and kind of leaving this bit open, but that didn't really offer that much, and I didn't really expect the desk to be particularly heavy, at least in comparison to like the kitchen and particularly the electrics. So I didn't do that. There wasn't really any way to make it work. I had to just move it. So essentially I then did the left hand wall, because that was now where this stuff was meant to go. Basically just repeated the process from the right hand wall from the last video, except that I think I stuck things in as I went rather than assembling everything and then sticking it, because it just felt like it was slightly more efficient. Like, there wasn't really any reason to friction fit everything before sticking it into place. It didn't really have any distinct advantages, so I just didn't do that this time round, and I think it was a little bit quicker, and it would also be quicker because I'd already done it once. And obviously I already had the template for the wheel arch, so cutting the next piece of ply was a little bit easier. I added 10mm, like I suggested would be a good idea from what I should have done in the last video, and yet somehow it still wasn't quite enough, so probably should have gone with like 15 or 20mm actually. I don't really know how that happened. It didn't seem like there was that much give needed, but apparently there was, so it was still kind of awkward even doing it the second time round. But hey, that's what a van build is, a series of awkward things to do. Seriously guys, build a van, you won't regret it. It's awesome. And so that pretty much takes us to a close for this video, because again I'm trying to keep these a little bit shorter and snappier, both for attention spans and ease of editing and just being a bit more to the point. So I haven't fit the wheel arch box yet, because there is a little bit of extra faffing around required before I can do that, like attaching the outer batten that I was talking about and doing the ground. So the next video probably is going to be longer, because I'm going to be talking about just getting the power station up and running, getting those electrons pushing around some circuits, which, you know, naturally is kind of a big thing to do. So I will catch you on the flippity flops and see you in the next video.